Welcome to Developing a Change-Oriented Culture, part of the Rutgers Business School Signature Leadership Series. Our webinar today is brought to you in valued partnership with Tech United New Jersey. Previously known as the Tech Council of New Jersey, Tech United NJ empowers innovators, entrepreneurs, and instigators. To learn more, visit their website, techunited.co. Generous corporate sponsors, promotional partners such as Tech United NJ, and individual contributors are coming together to help our students by raising awareness and funds for the 1,000 Laptop Challenge. Our semester has begun with remote instruction. Can you imagine attending your classes and doing all of your schoolwork online without a computer? This is a real struggle for some of our students. How can you help, you ask? Please consider making a donation to the 1,000 Laptop Challenge Fund. Also, please check with your employer. Your company may have a charitable arm, or they may match your gift. Kindly watch for the email that will follow this webinar so you'll have a direct link to the donation page for the 1,000 Laptop Challenge Fund. We thank you in advance for being part of this important initiative. The Rutgers Business School Signature Leadership Series is a relatively new learning opportunity that brings you lessons of resilience, resourcefulness, responsibility, and reinvention through bi-weekly conversations with thought leaders and business leaders from across industry spectrums. We're excited to chat with Len DeCandia of Johnson & Johnson so he can share glimpses of his everyday real-life challenges, as well as lessons from his leadership playbook. Len's career as a Chief Supply Chain Officer, Chief Procurement Officer spans over 25 years and 4 Fortune 200 companies. He's currently the Chief Procurement Officer for J&J. He's going to tell you more about what that entails, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but I do want to mention that Rutgers Business School is grateful for Len's leadership as the founding chair of the RBS Center for Supply Chain Management, being a valued member of the Dean's Advisory Board, and serving as an adjunct professor teaching supply chain innovation management at the graduate level. He's also a proud alumnus of Rutgers School of Engineering for his bachelor's degree and Rutgers Business School with his MBA. Here to facilitate today's discussion is Rutgers Business School Assistant Professor Hussan Peavey. Hussan's career in academia began part-time in 2015 and became full-time with the spring 2020 semester. Prior to becoming an RBS professor, his corporate career included employers such as SGS, Markel Manufacturing, Medicia Holdings, and Schweid & Sons, as well as Johnson & Johnson and Estee Lauder, two places where he very happily crossed paths with Len. He's the best possible person to help us to get to know Len DeCandia better. And with that, I'd like to hand things over to Hussan now.
Hey, I want to thank everyone for taking time out of your schedule to join us today. But more importantly, I would like to thank Len for sharing his perspective and leadership. Len, now I want to get into it fairly quickly because we don't have that much time to go over your vast knowledge here, right? So tell us a little bit more about your background. I know you and I did the Rutgers thing, we did the J&J thing. We actually met our wives at Rutgers University. So we have some stuff in common. We're tall, dark, and handsome as well, right? So tell the audience, because I guarantee you we have our students, our colleagues, professionals, stakeholders, everyone out there wanting to know more about your career. Tell us about your career.
Well, thank you, Hussan. And again, a pleasure to be here with you. Always a pleasure to help all of my colleagues at Rutgers. And you're absolutely right. The greatest thing that Rutgers gave us was our wonderful wives. And here I am 42 years later with two fantastic kids that I'm extremely proud of and forever grateful to Rutgers University for that. But, I think for all of us, we're all shaped by our lives and our experiences. So for me, I'm very, very New Jersey. And I would say a lot of my affiliation with Rutgers is associated with my background. Like many Rutgers students, I'm a first-generation American. So both of my parents are from Italy, and we're both impacted significantly by the war. But they were wonderful. They instilled in us a commitment to family and hard work and education. a real respect and appreciation for education. I grew up in Hoboken, New Jersey, which is right across the river from Manhattan. And I grew up in a Hoboken of the 60s and 70s, which was very diverse, very working class, and a wonderful place to really learn about not only my own culture, but other cultures and experiences. And living right across from Manhattan and being that close to, for me, was like Oz, because an immigrant son in a walk up. We don't belong in wonderful places like Manhattan. We belong someplace, digging a ditch, right? But I hope it's not dead, but I really believe in the American dream. And for me, growing up in the 60s, I was heavily influenced by the space race. President Kennedy had made the commitment, putting a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And so for those of us in school, math and science really started to become very, very important. And I was very fortunate to be a good math student. And what helped me, I think, with that was because of that run to space and that push towards math, I experienced an intervention. So, one day I went home for Christmas break and I was in the 3rd grade, and I had my Christmas break and came back and they put me in the 4th grade. I was like, wow, I thought I usually had to wait till the end of the year to be able to do that. And then I went home and had my summer of the 4th grade, thinking I was going to start in the 5th grade. And then I showed up at school and they put me in the 6th grade, right? So all of a sudden, someone believed that I was pretty good at math, and they were kind of moving me through the system. And as a child who really didn't understand or didn't know whatever tools or gifts I was given, that made me feel a lot more confident about myself. Mm-hmm. And it really helped me better understand the possibilities in life. And that really was when I started to become very interested in being an engineer someday. And so I went to Rutgers and graduated in engineering in the early 80s and started my career at Johnson & Johnson almost 40 years ago. You can imagine that. Spent the first real formative years of my career at J&J, about 15. But it was in the early days of when the computer really started to be introduced into industry and into manufacturing. And I was really excited about the possibilities of how that technology could make what we do that much more important. And ended up moving to Roche Pharmaceuticals because there was an opportunity for me there to really have this first-time title of Vice President of Supply Chain Management, where I really had the opportunity from an end-to-end perspective to really understand how things started at a supplier and ended up somewhere with a customer. And that's where I met Dr. Lay, and we had Dean Tuckman, who was fantastic in the business school. And we started the Center for Supply Chain Management because, like anything else, technology is usually ahead of we human beings. And so what was really, really important was to really understand how we could start to introduce more of these best practices, share these best practices, and really build this science of what we call supply chain management that continues to become more important every day. And I seem to have this interest in introducing technology and transforming organizations to drive greater value. So that was the work that I did in my responsibilities as Chief Supply Officer at Roche. But then I started to wonder what happened to all of these drugs when they left our distribution center. I had the good fortune of moving over and taking a position as the head of supply chain for a company called AmerisourceBergen, which is the second largest pharmaceutical distributor in the United States. Almost $100 billion of drugs are distributed, right? The whole market in the United States is over 350 billion, if not more at this stage. And it gave me a greater opportunity to understand what happened at the patient level and how that worked its way back. I had an opportunity to work with all the pharmaceuticals companies in the world that distributed products in the United States. And it was a great assignment. And 15 years of doing supply chain, I was ready for my next real challenge. And what I started to see was most organizations were doing a lot more collaboration. The world gets much more sophisticated, and you really can't have all of those capabilities in your own organization. You really need to work with partners and suppliers to be able to deliver your products and services. So I really felt it was a good time for me to work more globally and to work in a space which was much more innovative. And I went to the consumer side, and that's, I think, where we met, if I'm not mistaken, at Estee Lauder, and went to the procurement side because I was very excited about working with suppliers and connecting those dots around driving innovation and bringing that type of speed of innovation to market. It's incredible in a company like that where they do over 3,000 launches a year and truly global, very much supplier innovation driven, and very attuned to the customer and the consumer, really understanding trends, being ahead of the trends, very, very exciting. And then somehow an opportunity came for a second act at Johnson & Johnson. One of the reasons why I left Johnson & Johnson and ran these other assignments was I have a very strong philosophy when it comes to supply chain and procurement that they should be center-led functions, because it's really about scale. It's really about looking across your entire market. It's about driving and scaling best practices. And it just so happened after decades of decentralization, Johnson & Johnson had made a commitment to take the procurement function and make it a center-led function and an enterprise function after decades of it being decentralized. And it really, for me, the way I explain it, since I really started my career there and my heart was there, was that I spent some time with some wonderful friends through the years, but I'm home now, and it's been great working with the team at Johnson & Johnson and being able to do this work where we are now living in this digital world, in this cloud-enabled world, where technology can really unleash and allow us to do more and be more and really find new and strategic ways of being a valued partner to the people that we support. Most importantly, our customers and our patients, the doctors and the moms and dads who we touch every day. And a company like J&J touches over 1 billion people a day. So it's a wonderful opportunity, but more importantly, it's a great responsibility.
Hey, Len, I think you got one of the storied career paths I've ever seen in my career, right? So I have a question. As we move into looking at innovation, technology, you have led some significant transformations in your career, even here at J&J, in a very centralized, bringing into centralization, the procurement organization. Tell me how CPOs should be thinking about the ready now in forward-looking future preparedness. Tell me about that. How is digitization or technology playing into what you're doing today, and some hints to other CPOs? What should they be doing?
And what we're doing now, right? We're connecting with a group of people around the country, maybe even around the world, right? And sharing insights and thoughts and ideas. Whether you're a CPO or whomever, I think a great responsibility of any leaders to be to anticipate, to really know what is out in front and making sure their organization is ready for that new and different future. Now that takes a lot of courage, but more importantly, it takes the opportunity, the ability to understand all the constituents who are critically important to your business. And so being that leader who can anticipate, then you really need to understand if that's where we need to go, what are the 3 dimensions of what it takes to get from here to there, right? And technology obviously is a platform for being able to do that and build off of that. And the world we're living in today with cloud technology, all of us can add an app at any minute, right? So it just seems as if the world that I grew up in, when we decided to make a technology innovation like an enterprise resource planning system, whatever else, it would take 3 to 5 years. and it would take a significant amount of investment. But I think we live more in a world today of a best in breed type approach where you can plug and play with different technologies and different tools that enables your organization to be that prepared for the future. So the technology is the enabler. I don't think it's changed. The technology is usually ahead of all of us. And then probably the more difficult thing is the fact that the world is complex. But many times we in organizations create our own complexity, right? We start to have different ways of doing business, different processes and practices that we use. And some of them, might be redundant or might not really be adding much value and really keeping people busy, or more importantly, people frustrated from being able to contribute and make a difference, right? And so I think along with that technology, finding that clear path of those processes and practices that you can start to, an old world word we would use would be harmonize, but standardize, or a common approach or a consistent approach of how you go about and do your business. And I think that is foundational to a lot of the conversation that's going on today, regardless of where you fit in your organization, around this concept of agility, right? And I think agility, in my definition, is understanding, the situation that you're in and being able to quickly adapt and adopt to that situation, and not letting those consequences define you, but really overcoming those consequences and being able to continue to move forward. And so I think that's where the most important aspect of any transformation and the most important element or aspect of any business are people. And the people aspects of that are really about, allowing people to understand the fundamental elements of why are we making this change. And, if they don't understand why, it's very difficult to get the type of buy-in you would need, because if many of us have been successful in what we've been doing, or it's taking us some time to be able to do this. And, most importantly, people have mortgages and kids in school or whatever else. When you start to challenge, what I'm doing every day and how I'm doing it and how I believe I'm bringing value and being valued, you really have to give them the opportunity to understand the importance, not only to the broader constituents, whether it's your customer or your internal business partner or your shareholder, but their benefit as well.
Hey, Len, I want to jump in real quick. I want to ask you a question. Now, do you think technology is changing expectations faster than they did years ago?
Yeah, I think, well, because of the fact that it can be introduced quickly and simpler, I think it's accelerating everything. But I think we, as a population, have become much more comfortable with technology as well, right? Because we use it at home and we use it to interact with each other and so on. So it really is accelerating this change. The issue is, for any leader, is how do you take your people from where you're at to where you want to go, and how do you keep them together and being able to do that? So for me, once they start down that path of understanding the why, allowing them to have the freedom to start to define the what and the how, so that they can drive their own ship across that river, as opposed to you trying to drag them across. And more importantly than anything else, it allows some freedom to collaborate. And I'm sure that teams are much better in defining and understanding how to solve a problem than any one individual. But I think the leader has to really bring that clarity of the why, create the environment that allows them to see their future in that future, and give them some of the freedom to operate as they kind of work their way through their current state to that future state.
No, I think that's great insight, Len. When you start looking at people, process, and technology, right? And you look at today, right? I'm going to call it today, the world today. Do you feel that a lot of the stuff, initiatives that J&J procurement organization, yourself put in place, had you ahead of the curve? What was successful, right? Managing through today. What was successful? Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I think, the the current crisis and any future crisis we're going to face are really dependent on exactly what you're talking about, the readiness of your organization. So the investment we made in a center-led model allowed us to have a common view of what was happening around the world. Think about this crisis we've been experiencing now, where different markets are scaling up and scaling down. We have customers in those markets, we have suppliers in those markets, we have our own plants in those markets. So having a central view of what was happening around the world in order to, and look, we're in the healthcare business, and if we weren't built for this situation, that would be very unfortunate, but we were built for this situation. Johnson & Johnson was ready for this. So that whole concept of having a central view of what was happening around the world, having information in one place so that we can use that information for insights and decision making, and being able to see where we could leverage some of those capabilities. Where some markets were up and running, how could we from those markets be able to help those markets that weren't, and vice versa. But whenever you go through the transformation, I can't help but overemphasize the whole concept of leadership and focus. I'll give you an example. I took over the supply chain for Roche Pharma North America, and it wasn't in good shape. We were in not delivering to the expectations of our customers and patients, and more importantly, the team was really fatigued. They were working really, really hard, and I was hearing it. I was hearing that people were coming in early and they were staying late, but you never really see it. You would drive past the parking lot and you would see it full in the morning and you'd see it full at night. And I think one of the most important responsibilities of any leader is to really understand what the priorities are, what the focus is, so that you can execute against those handful of important initiatives that drive value. And so in that situation, I just started to talk to the people on the team, and I said, well, what's a day like for you? And they would say, well, Len, I come in the morning early and I have about 100 emails from the day before that I never had a chance to get to, and I kind of prioritize a few of those for today, and I leave about 50, and then I feel like I'm in meetings from like 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night. And sometimes I don't know why I'm in this meeting, who's running this meeting, what decisions are being made, what project I'm working on. And then at 5 o'clock, I come back and there's another 150 emails. And, I've got to figure out which one I'm going to do before I get a chance to go home. And I said, well, that's crazy. And so what we did was we just did an inventory of all the projects that we had. And I said, look, I want to know every project that we're doing. I mean, a project where you have to go to a meeting that you're supposedly on the team, and a project that has a sponsor. We came up with like 270 projects, and this was across the whole enterprise. I said, 270 projects. I said, fine, let's do step 2. I want to know who the sponsor is of every one of these projects. And I want someone at least at the VP level, so that I can understand how it ties into the broader strategic plan of the organization. Well, that was an interesting experience, right? Because you had people working on projects and the sponsor was like, I had no idea you were working on that. That was just a question I asked at the last meeting. And literally, this is a true story. Literally, we cut that list of 270 down to about 80 or 85.
Wow, right? Wow,
and
wow.
Through all of that, I had to have big town halls because people thought, oh, he's getting rid of all these projects because he's going to fire all of us. And I said, no, right? You had to make a commitment to people that, this is about making the best use of your time, because we want your world to be productive, but we also want you to have a life outside of what we do.
Now, did your overall strategy, right, help whittle down the number of projects, right?
Absolutely.
And how do you frame that out? How do you look 5 years out for a business such as Johnson & Johnson, or just in the healthcare industry? How does it look, or just in business in general?
Yeah, I think, if you first of all, you have to always know where your patients and your customers are, or where they're going. Right? And either you have to be there with them, or maybe be out in front of them a little bit more, right? And the issue that I'm talking about here with these projects was exactly what you were saying, just fundamental alignment to the strategic plan of the organization. And so within 18 months, with no big capital investments and no big, we went from last to being the only pharmaceutical company to ever win all 3 wholesalers supplier
Wow.
of the year awards, right?
Wow.
And
That's
that was
impressive.
just giving people good direction and good support and creating an environment that allows people to be successful. So does that build resilience? Yes, but does that really ask for leaders to be very aware and making sure that they really understand what's happening in the day of a life of all the people that are so important in your organization that you rely on getting work done. And when you look at what we're dealing with now with the crisis, we're asking people to be focused in their work life, but they also have a private life. I think before we started, you said that you have a couple of young children at home that you're helping while you have a full-time job. So are we as leaders fully aware of that, and how are we working with you on that? That's an important part of resilience, right? Because we need resilience at a human level, and we need resilience at an organizational level, and we need to respect and appreciate all of the responsibilities that we have both at work and at home. That makes us more productive and better people, and that's really all you want, right? For yourself and for others. How can I best every day? I think we wake up every morning with the hope of being the best every day, and the hope that working with others, they allow us that opportunity, or they appreciate that opportunity that we invest our time in our passions and our energy.
Hey, Len, I want to talk about another topic. I want to talk about education. And you being the founding chair, one of the founding chairs for RBS Supply Chain.
The founding chair. I sat in that chair for 12 years.
I said that the other day.
You know how many companies I had to call to raise money?
No, I said that the other day to someone, and they challenged me. I was like, no, he's on the building.
Let me tell you something. Success has many parents. Failure has but one. Okay? I love the idea that success has many parents, but anyway, that was your question.
Hey, so how do you see academia staying competitive in this new environment, right? You helped launch a platform at Rutgers University that is now ranked #1 in some cases throughout the country, right? And in other circumstances throughout the world, we're highly rated from a supply chain standpoint.
Right.
What's next, right? We got to be looking 5 years out. What's next?
Sure.
What's next?
Well, I think, so let's go back to, 2000, right, when we started the center. And if you look at what the situation was at Rutgers, there was no such thing as a supply chain management department, right? Dr. Lay, who's the dean of the business school now, was in the informatics or the information technology area, right? Because I think the philosophy of the thinking early was, if you build the technology, then everything else would follow. But the reality was the processes, the practices, the people drive the technology and how to use it. So we had to change the paradigm on all of that. And we were fortunate. We knew and we recognized that as we started to take more and more friction out of the experience of acquiring something, right? We as a person, whether I want to buy a shirt or buy a car, or I need to see a physician and get some med, we want that experience to be custom and unique and the best experience that we can have. And I think supply chain, and what we saw then was the fact that in order to get from point A to point B, there were a lot of different constituents involved. When I first started as an engineer at Johnson & Johnson did everything. They made their own adhesives, they made their own backings, they molded their own parts. And what I saw in the 80s and in the early 90s was no organization could be that vertically integrated. Look at the auto industry. Ford made everything themselves. Now they have many partners and they just maybe build an engine and a transmission themselves, right? So we recognize that the ability to bring innovation, to bring value to each one of us as consumers really require the integration of all these various partners. So how do you bring these partners together? How do you allow them to align on a strategy? How do you allow them to align and work from common information so that when somebody buys a shirt large in red, that the need to refill that inventory goes all the way back to the original source so that can start again. So I think when you look at where we're going today, and it's being accelerated. It's being accelerated by the crisis we're dealing with now. People are becoming much more comfortable in the digital world. You know, they're doing more grocery shopping now online. You see what's happening with malls and shopping areas, and really concerned around, are they ever going to come back? Is that an experience that people are going to let go of and embrace another experience? What are people doing with that extra time now, and how are they filling that extra time? So let's equate that, and maybe let's do a little visioning around supply chain, right? Just think about how we live every day. We were just talking about the fact that I don't have to worry about commute time anymore, right? At least during the current circumstances. So I've just gained about 2 hours every day, right? We just, Amazon has
I use my extra time for sleep, just so that you know.
Amazon has made that experience where it could be here by the end of the day sometimes, or the next morning. It saves me a trip to the store, right? And so is that going to continue to happen in the future? Maybe not to the extent we see now, but that's going to continue to happen. There's going to be more customization. You look at what's happening in my world in terms of healthcare with the integration of technology at the level where people are wearing their iWatches that are monitoring them all day long. How does that data get connected back to the physician who's, is looking at their condition, making some decisions on that condition, putting a therapy in place, monitoring whether that therapy is actually working or not, right? And so that is a future world where companies are becoming more than just product companies, they're experience companies. Think about the experience that we've just had over the past 10 years with a brilliant company like Apple, right? People love going to an Apple store and being able to shop. And so I think that experience beyond just the product or service is becoming an emotional experience. So supply chain not only has to deliver the product, but they have to deliver the positive emotional experience that comes along with working with that particular company. And there are many other responsibilities companies have beyond that. You think about supply chain and other areas where they have an impact, and I have a passion for this, Hussan, so I apologize.
No.
Supply chain has a responsibility in terms of environmental and social impact, right? Because supply chain is where all the company's assets reside. Are we using our assets in an environmentally clean way? And if you take a responsibility in a role like I have with my colleagues at Johnson & Johnson, who procure over $30 billion around the world, are we using our purchasing power to drive good? Are we using our purchasing power to drive better practices in terms of, how employees and people are treated around the world? Are we using our purchasing power to drive more investment in local communities with minority-owned and diverse suppliers, so on and so forth? So I think supply chain has a responsibility not only in the experience and delivering that value every day, but also has the responsibility of using the shareholders' assets to drive positive good in the world.
So one of the things we discussed in the past is, especially at the academia level, at the university level, school levels, do you see that procurement plays a significant role in shoring up social equity, providing resources where there's no resources? Just earlier during the introduction, we actually talked about laptops for students.
Exactly.
There's students who don't have laptops and they're struggling. I actually have students sometimes, and we have to get them the resources very quickly that are trying to take exams with their phones, right? So do you think procurement plays a role in social equity, leveling the field, giving access so that the whole world can benefit from what they're learning?
Yeah, I absolutely yes to that, right? If you look at what's happening in areas like the Business Roundtable, right, many of our chief executive officers are now talking about the responsibility of business. If you look at a function like procurement within the context of that, right, we're an enabling function, right? We connect the needs of the internal budget owners with the community of suppliers or capabilities. And so how do we create an easier way for those buyers to connect with those communities and those communities to connect with a complex company like Johnson & Johnson. And we've done it with technology. So I mentioned earlier that we've enabled our organization, and we actually just completed its final phases of the world's largest cloud-based procurement system. So here we are right in your backyard in New Brunswick, right? But it was interesting because about 3 or 4 years ago, we started to see some of our investment in diverse and minority-owned suppliers kind of flatten out. And we had a hackathon, where you bring a lot of bright people together and come up with an idea about how can we do this better. And we had a wonderful team of young people who just basically, and I sat there for the reviews, and it was one of those moments that you never forget, right? And they said, we're investing all this money in creating a marketplace for people to buy and connect suppliers to our J&J colleagues. Why don't we create a unique marketplace just for diverse suppliers? And so we went back to our innovation partner, our technology partner, SAP, and they agreed to co-innovate with us and create what we call Buy Diverse. So now, person in Johnson & Johnson who wants to buy something or requisition can go into their Buy Diverse marketplace, can learn about that diverse supplier, get the backstory, and participate in driving more business. Because we know that by driving more business there, economically, these suppliers, these minority-owned suppliers, hire within their community, right? When you start to create economic health, you start to drive more better social health, right? Because you have better housing, you have safer streets, you have better nutrition for the children, and you have better education for the children, right? And so by creating technology as an enabler and connecting the people within Johnson & Johnson who want to make a difference with those suppliers who are making a difference, we've seen in deployments 25% increase in investment.
Wow.
And it's fantastic. And we've now deployed it in places like South Africa and the UK. So we've taken this model globally. But if you take Rutgers Business School and you take what's happening at the Business Roundtable, I know that there's a center that's just been developed over the past year or two around corporate citizenship. And I think that is something, I think when about 10 or 15 years ago, business schools said we have to teach our business students about ethics. Now I think business schools should have a requirement around citizenship and positive social impact. And I think a function like procurement can play a significant strategic role in being able to drive that difference.
Now, Lynn, before I jump to the audience and see if we have any questions out there, I want to ask you one more question. So today, right, 9 months ago, our world changed, right? Do you think that our the expectations in or what we're doing now is now the new norm relative to collaboration, speed of supply chain, assessing gaps, where am I buying my supply chain at? Who's my partners? Do you think that norm has changed? Is today the new normal how we manage our supply chains, right? So that it's always prepared, right? We talk about future readiness, right? I always talk about looking out as far as we can. Is this the new norm to work together? I'm impressed. Let me say this. I'm impressed with the way your industry peers in J&J are working together today. Is that the new norm?
I think there's going to be much more collaboration, without a doubt, right? Whether it's the issue of social justice we just spoke of, or the work that's happening right now in combating the pandemic, that I think is absolutely correct. That's the way the world is evolving, and how business should work together, maybe to share best practices, share insights, and bring greater value to humanity. But I also think that the world is changing in many other ways. There's going to be there's more of an impact, I think, on climate. I think we're starting to recognize that things are happening, and I'm not going to debate what's causing it to happen, but I know in New Jersey, 5 of the hottest Julys occurred within the last 7 years, right? According to our colleagues at Rutgers, right? And we have geopolitical challenges that are out there. So I think supply chain and procurement professionals are really having to go deep in better understanding how their supply chain works. And it's become more important to boards. I think boards kind of expected things to happen and they invest in it, which is great. But when all of a sudden people are going to the store and they can't find toilet paper, or they can't find paper towels, or they can't find your product, you're losing revenue. It's starting to become very important to your board. And so now boards are asking their organizations, how resilient are your supply chains? And I think resiliency is an outcome. Sometimes we have a tendency to say, oh, we're going to have a resilient, it's an outcome. What are some of the hows to achieving that resiliency? And I think that's where, education really needs to go, right? All around data, all around digital and digitalization, data analytics, being able to see things before they happen, or at least be able to analyze them so you can make better, smarter decisions. The ability to understand a very complex and changing regulatory environment around the world. Different countries have their different ways of doing business. Places like Rutgers really need to educate our students in understanding and being sensitive to that. How do you set up redundancy? Where do you set up redundancy? Where's the best place for you to be closer to your customer? Where are those places where you can't be, but you can leverage your infrastructure? So I think those next levels of complexity in working in a very complex, in a world that's changing dramatically as it relates to the environment, the geopolitical situation, and most importantly, the behaviors of all of us as customers and patients. I've had to see my doctor 3 times, and I spoke to my doctor just like I spoke to you right over the screen here, right? I'm getting comfortable with that. My doctor's getting comfortable with that. I make another phone call and my meds show up, right? So, so this whole issue about future ready is a recognition of what's happening today, and then making sure that what you're investing in is creating the opportunity for your team to really thrive and grow, learn from each other, collaborate, and make a difference. I've seen a real shift towards a technology like artificial intelligence and robotics. And what that's doing is freeing up our minds and freeing up our talent to be able to do just that. Think about the future and what should we be doing today to be able to bring more value. And for us at Johnson & Johnson, and those of you who know us, we have what we call our credo. And our credo stakeholders are our customers, our patients, moms, the dads, the doctors, our suppliers, our greatest asset, our employees, and the communities that we all live and work in. And I think, I'm excited about you taking a full-time role there, because I think what makes that department so great are the faculty and the students that we attract. They're hardworking students. They're kids like you and me who didn't think we had a chance, and Rutgers gives them a chance. And then it's up to them. And people like you giving back and being part of that really means a lot to me. So thank you for doing that.
I would just amen to that, because I would say that this has been, J&J and my other career experience has allowed me to transition to my love of teaching, right? Sharing knowledge, working with each other and collaborating. And that's why our relationship has done so well over many years. You treating lunch and me eating, we have a really clear understanding of how that works.
Well, we're having a virtual lunch today. It'll help with our waistlines.
So I want to jump to some questions. I want to jump to some of our audience questions, right? Our audience actually had a good question. How critical is it to address the mindset of your employees before deploying technology that's supposed to be transformational? Because we talk about people first, so how critical is to get folks on the same page?
Extremely. I think it's a threat. I mean, we're comfortable in what we do. And why do you want to change that? I finally figured this out. And it's hard work. It's emotional work. It's an investment. And let's be clear on all of this. Not everyone is going to make that journey. And that's the hardest part for any leader. And what you find, and what I found in many of these transformations are, and I hate to, but I'll do it anyway, in the spirit of being a professor, all right? So we'll do some professor talk here. So let's say we have a kind of a standard curve of how people are going to embrace change. And on one end, you'll have a small population who are very excited about doing things differently. Maybe they're not happy with the way things work today. Maybe they see more opportunity in what's there tomorrow. But you have a core of those who see the future and want to kind of shape and make the future. Then you go to the other end and you have a handful of people who are frightened by the future, right? Very much uncomfortable with it. And then you have the group here. This is where I believe leadership comes in. And probably the most important thing you can do is how do you move the mean? So you have to focus your efforts on the two extremes, right? How can you use the inspiration and the vision of those who see it to help to influence the broader organization? And how can you invest in those that might not see it or might need to understand that they need to take on new skills? You might need to invest in them, or this new environment is an environment they're uncomfortable with. That's a small population. The majority of the time, it's just about understanding what the future means to them and how they can thrive in it. But if you focus your energies on the two ends in a way that those in the middle see how you're investing in those leaders to help bring the rest of the group along, and you're investing in those that are concerned about it because you care.
Okay.
Middle of the group.
I was scared for a second. I thought you was going to go into standard deviations and stuff.
No R squared today.
So I have another question regarding, can you give a little insight on how pharmaceutical industry in the consumer packaging or commodity type products are being impacted differently by today Amazon efficiency of our supply chain? So is probably like 5 questions bundled here.
Yeah, there is. That's a big one, right?
What's the difference? Is there a significant difference between them?
Yeah, it's a big difference, right? Because, I think we grew up in a world where advertising was to get a broad message out and then hope you hit your population. Today's world, it's very much directed, right? 2 or 3 clicks and people have us completely figured out from a demographic standpoint. And so just that whole concept of consumer being aware of your product is important. I think the second piece is, and we touched on it earlier, I think consumers want a relationship beyond the product. They want, and especially the younger generations, they want to know who they're investing in before they're willing to buy that product. And so that's when we talked about those concepts of being a good global citizen, right? Of being a company that's invested in treating their people with respect, a company that treats the world with respect, that reinvests in the world. So I think that aspect of it becomes as important, if not more important. When you start to look at the concept, and Amazon is a supply chain company, period, right? Mm-hmm. They don't make anything, right? They just take from suppliers and make it a great experience from you. And many of us are somewhere in the middle of that. What's interesting is starting to watch companies like Walmart compete with Amazon, and how Walmart is trying to change that paradigm a little bit by being able to provide what you want to do and most comfortable with. I know for me, once things loosened up a little bit in New Jersey, sometimes I buy my groceries online. Sometimes I like to go to the grocery store and pick out my produce, right? I can't do that, right? So Walmart is kind of creating a little, and they have the hard assets to be able to kind of find that careful balance between the two. So companies that are in the middle there, they need to be close to the consumer. If Amazon's between you and the consumer, then you don't know what that consumer is thinking and behaving. And so how do they get closer to the consumer? Build the loyalty with your product, build the trust with your company. Look, and I think our CEO mentioned this about a week ago in one of his talks, our Tylenol volume went up 178% during the middle of this pandemic.
Wow.
Right? It was a critical product for people who were either getting, and I think we refer to it as pantry filling, right? Because you wanted to be prepared for the pandemic. So for us, it was being able to have everything in that supply chain work to get that product to you, but it was there for you when you needed it. And hopefully that helps with your J&J trust mark. And I'm sure it's like that for anyone who's in any type of consumer business. Were your products there for your consumer the way they wanted it, when they needed it? And that will never change.
So just between you and the audience, that I refer to my wife as the Amazon queen, because the only house I know I can get 10 separate deliveries in like 3 days. So I'm really impressed with that. She knows how to bring it in and have us ready for the next week. So I'm impressed with her doing that. My
Great.
question to you is like, is there a drawback? Right. So here's one of the concerns. Is it a drawback to having, there's so many advantages of having good data, big data, to crunch and analyze, understand where your markets are, how to serve your supply chains, right? Is it a drawback to having too much data? What's the watch outs and the protections within procurement organizations today, right? Based on infiltrating data or something like that.
Yeah. No, it's a very good point, and it's a very real issue, right? Because now we're bombarded with data. And the first question, is it good? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so your first challenge is this good data? Is it accurate data? And then the second challenge is, how do I use this data to help me achieve my organization's objective? And, I see schools like Rutgers and organizations like ours bringing in and getting these really talented people, and how they cut and dice data so it helps you make decisions. During the pandemic, as a procurement function, one of the things we wanted to monitor as we went through was how much activity was happening in each one of the markets that we do business in. How much were our people buying were actually to keep the business running, and how much was actually being delivered or the services being. And it was amazing. If we did not have that global integrated database, right? We're connected to 98% of the spend around the world for Johnson & Johnson. We know every month, where we're spending, whom we're spending it with, and how that's helping us understand the health of the collaboration and the relationship of the work we're doing on the supplier side. While obviously, like any other company, we're constantly making sure and monitoring that we're achieving the needs of our patients and our customers around the world. So I think data is dangerous. Data needs to be good. It has to be data that is meaningful. And I think the future is all about those talented individuals that can take that information, make it good, and then translate it into tools that we could use to be better in where we invest, how we invest, and how well we're performing.
So we have some minutes left, but I have a couple of questions, and it looks like we're getting some questions for some students relative to, do you have any advice on soft skills, how to develop them? Are they critical to your success in your career? Right. So were they critical to you, in how do you continue to develop them, or develop them in your team that you mentor or help grow their careers?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I always talk about with my leaders is authenticity, right? I mentioned earlier, regardless of what title you call me, or I'm still the same son of immigrants who grew up in Hoboken, hoping to someday be able to have a job, right? So you have to be yourself, right? And we're all a product of our experiences. When you talk about leadership, I think one of the real important characteristics, it's a sense of empathy, really understanding the experience that the person that you're working with on your team or on the other side of the table, and understanding that experience and being able to translate what you're doing to help with. And look, work is usually trying to solve a problem, trying to fix something, or try to make something better. And so along with empathy comes the ability to partner with other people, to collaborate, to share, and to find ways where you can achieve success as a team. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that sometimes you don't try to move things forward, but in all cases, no one does anything alone, right? It takes a village.
That's true.
I think the beyond just the collaboration skills and the ability to work with others and it's hard. I mean, I learned you have to be a lifelong learner. I mean, every day you have to wake up wanting to learn something new. Because learning something new is just going to make you feel better about who you are, right? And that whole issue around self-awareness and knowing what you're pretty good at and knowing what you're not good at means knowing what you could bring to a team and knowing what you need to get from a team. But you can always work on expanding and developing those skills. For those who are like us in the engineering supply chain management space, you know, sometimes there's two things I always find with engineers and people in supply chain. One is they're very humble and they're very focused on getting their job done, and they say, I'll let my work speak for itself. And I think that's great. But sooner or later, as a leader, you're going to have to stand up for your team. You're going to have to bang the table and say, my team needs recognition. You know, they've worked really hard and they're really delivering value here. And don't be afraid to stand up for your team. And don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, because sometimes, you know, people forget that we're there.
I think that's perfect. The question that ties clearly into is the question regarding, did you know, or when did you know, as a first generational, you know, growing up here, that you were a leader? Or did you grow into that? Explain that. Did you know it, or you just took the bull by the horns and say, hey, someone's got to do it, right?
You know, I don't know if the issue was knowing. I think the issue was I've been very fortunate in my career. I was at the beginning phases of this whole concept of supply chain management. And for me, it turned into my craft. It just, you know, was one of those things that I had a tremendous passion for. And I've been very, very fortunate in being able to bring value to teams and bring value to organizations. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, when I lay my head on the pillow at night, the thing that I'm most proud of is when my team accomplishes something that they never thought they could, both as a team and as individuals. I look at the work that our team just completed in a big complex organization like Johnson & Johnson over the past 4 or 5 years. And it just makes me so happy and so proud for them as individuals and as a team, because it took persistence. Persistence is an important trait along with being a lifelong learner. It took courage, because to our conversation earlier, you're going to be trying and doing things differently and new that you haven't done before. So you have to forget about the naysayers, believe in what you're doing, be persistent in what you're doing. And at the end, though, what's super important is be a good listener. You have to take change with the philosophy of continuous improvement. We introduce technology into a critical organizations that deal with people's lives every day. And boy, we had to get a lot of feedback on how we were doing it and how we were setting up our different tools for the organization to get it right. And I applaud our community of 140,000 J&J colleagues who were patient with us, who believed in us, that were open and transparent about what we could do better. But our team listened, right? So be transparent, be authentic, believe in what you're doing, forget the naysayers, and always operate with a philosophy of learning every day and continuous improvement.
All right, I got our last question that came across. This is our last question. So, is there a significant difference between the global supply chain and the local supply chain and how they're responding to our crisis today in reference to resilience?
Yeah, well, local is global and global is local, right?
And it used to be global. I remember the term global. I remember this term global from J&J.
So if I'm in a local community that's in shutdown, I'm relying on global. And if I'm a local community that's in shutdown, I'm relying on a local community that isn't to help the local community that is in shutdown. And that has been the #1 challenge in this pandemic for any supply chain, or the scaling up and scaling down of customers and buyers, your own sites, and your suppliers. If you think about a company like ours, and it's, you know, like I said, we're in over 60 countries around the world. We have suppliers in over 70 countries. And that's a lot of complexity. So in a situation like this, having that level of connectivity where you can rely on local to be global because of all of that is critically important. What's really important for a global company like ours is to think local. always have the respect and appreciation of those patients and customers, those employees, those communities that you do business every day. They're all over the world. They're all unique in their own way, but they're all important and they're all special.
Hey, Len, that was our last question. I want to say just thank you to the audience and yourself, especially for just sharing your insight, your years of experience, and then always making time, right? So in my career, what I found from you over the last 10 plus years is that you always made time to share your knowledge and also listen. So that's important. Thank you again, Len, for your help and your support for this leadership series.
Oh, thank you, Hussan, and thank you to Rutgers. You mean everything to me, guys.
I'd like to thank you both too so much. That was fantastic. We ran a little bit over, but we had so many great questions that we wanted to get to. I kind of eked out a little extra time from everyone, and I appreciate it. Great audience questions and certainly a great dialogue. Just wanted to remind everyone about that our next Signature Leadership Series will feature Ed McNamara from SHI International, and the series does take place on Thursdays at noon Eastern. So you'll see that on an upcoming Thursday. You can visit our webpage to learn more, but we will email it to you if you happen to be listening to the recording. You might want to hear it though. business.rutgers.edu/alumni/lifelong-learning. You'll receive a brief 2-question survey about today's event. It will include the 1,000 Laptop Challenge link referenced earlier. And we did record this, so we will be sharing the recording with our social media on our website and via email to our registrants. So thank you to our presenters. Thank you to our audience. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Go Rutgers. Go Rutgers.
Stay well, stay safe, everyone.
All right, stay safe. Take care, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.